Excellent. Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to today's talk. For people who are here live today, we're looking forward to, at the end, there being some questions. Just to give you all a rough idea of the structure today, we're going to be talking for about an hour with this roundtable talk with our panelists. And then we're going to have about 10 minutes where we're going to be doing a release of this amazing animation that a few people have developed, including myself. And then we're going to have in about 20 minutes or so for a Q&A. People who are joining, please feel free to turn your cameras off, but also make sure you mute yourselves just so that we don't hear any static or any feedback as we're going around. As I said beforehand, but just for the purpose of the recording, have I been on mute that whole time?
No, only at the end.
Okay, that was weird. I don't know what happened there. We're going to be talking about how gym culture needs to change to promote eating disorder prevention and recovery. We have only got an hour to do the talk today, so please be as we're going to be as quick as we can. But everyone, just make sure you're aware that we won't be able to talk about everyone's experience today, and we're definitely not going to cover everybody's experiences here, or people with lived experience who are listening to the recording, or people who are live today. So please don't feel like we're excluding that just because we haven't touched on it. There just is nowhere near enough time. We're all coming from our own backgrounds. Also, on that note, a slight trigger warning that we are obviously going to be talking about disordered eating and exercise addiction and body image and all sorts of things today. So, just be careful if you are listening along. And with that, I'm going to remind everyone, I think we've got someone who's unmuted, so make sure you mute yourselves if you are in the room. And I'm going to go with introductions. So I'll start off with myself. My name is George Mycock. I am the founder of MyoMinds, and I am a PhD student at the University of Worcester looking at muscularity-oriented issues in men, which I think will relate to today, obviously. And I'm here with Dr. Christian Edwards. If you want to introduce yourself, Christian.
Hi there, thanks George. I'm a lecturer at the University of Worcester and a researcher in our school's physical activity and research group. The primary focus of my work is on the antecedents and consequences of muscle-orientated body image. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Christian. And Anna Patterson.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a physio and I work for Nirren University Health Board. I work with children and young people and adults with eating disorders and help them manage and safely exercise.
Thanks, Anna. And Zoe?
Hello, I'm Zoe Burnett. I'm a children and young person senior specialist support officer here at First Steps Ed. I work one-to-one with children and young people struggling with eating disorders, and I'm also an expert by experience.
Thanks, Zoe. And last but not least, James.
Hi, it's lovely to see some familiar names and faces and people here and everybody else, of course. I hate this question. Who am I? What am I? What do I do? I do lots of different things in relation to eating disorders and mental health. Some of it's research, some of it's policy, and some of it is like a mixture of the two. And I think the other thing that's notable, I guess, for this is that I'm a yoga teacher, dance teacher, and meditation teacher as well. And I think like this might come up later on around identity and stuff, but for me I was just thinking, oh my goodness, I hate introducing myself. What am I? Which hat am I wearing right now? I never really know. And then I thought, oh well, it's kind of all happening in this body, isn't it? So I'm like an embodied being is what I would say, but that's very yoga, isn't it? Hi, I'm James and I'm embodied. Yeah, so that's it.
Amazing. Thank you, James. I think it's particularly hard when you do as many things as James does to define yourself. I think he has to list a whole stuff just to select a few every time someone asks him. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to be hosting today. So I'm going to be mostly asking questions, but I'm sure I'll get excited and pitch in as we go along. But I've got some questions that I want to ask and make sure we ask. And I'm probably going to butt in occasionally so that we can move along. Like, as I said, we haven't got an hour today, but I'm going to start off with a question orientated at Christian. As it currently sits, do we think gym culture promotes disordered behaviours, Christian, and how so, if so?
I think it's a really good question, George, and something our work's really considered. I think it does, but before I actually going to answer that or tackle it, I want to think about some of the complexity of the context. So the first thing to say is that gyms, exercise, bodybuilding can be health enhancing. There are, however, potential risks associated with the gym, and through this webinar, we'll come on to describe some of those risks. The second point to identify is that gyms do not exist in isolation. There are many external pressures that might influence a person's behaviour and what they aspire to be or do in that context. It's also important for me to note that most of my work focuses on muscularity-oriented body image. And like other body-related desires and disorders, some women might also develop a strong desire for muscle, and some of our recent work specifically focuses on women. Given the focus of either, though, I'll stay on men and within my area of muscularity. So what is evident in contemporary society is that there is now more pressure than ever on men to look a certain way. In many contexts, the contemporary ideal for men combines low body fat with well-developed muscles. And over the last 40 years or so, this body ideal has become progressively leaner and more muscular. To see how prevalent this body ideal is, we only have to turn on the TV, switch on social media, or glance at the covers of men's magazines. I mean, even the action figures in my son's toy box are becoming more muscular. As such, a man's body-related desires and gym-related behaviours might be influenced by a whole host of societal pressures. However, when looking at the antecedents to potentially unhealthy gym behaviour, for want of a better phrase, for me, a key point is that to some extent, all men are exposed to these contemporary ideals and unhealthy gym cultures. The extent, however, to which a man internalises these standards will depend on the individual and the meanings they make from their experiences. That is, not all men exposed to pressures to be muscular will develop a drive for muscularity or a muscle-building preoccupation. And in trying to understand what factors might lead some men to internalise these standards and to develop a potentially unhealthy gym behaviour, my work focuses on how men understand themselves and their identities. In much of this work, we've spent a significant amount of time in gyms talking to men about how they came to have and how they live with a muscle building preoccupation. And I'll recount some of those stories, if that's okay with you, to highlight the influence of these pressures, the gyms and gym culture. When interviewing these men, one of the key factors that comes up is they frequently identified a perceived discrepancy between themselves and the dominant standards of masculinity. They often mention significant male figures who demonstrate what these men believed is an acceptable masculine standard, and how they didn't conform to these, they believed they didn't conform to these requirements. In these men's stories, they often disclose how they were unable to identify who they were quite often and what they could be. These men in our sample, and I'm speaking particularly about that sample here, also believe there were very few ways available for them to form an appropriate masculine identity. In turn, building muscle, gym training is one way they found to build their masculine status. As such, men may choose the gym because it's available to them and it's within their control. Also, in contemporary society, developing a muscular physique may hold more value than other typical masculine behaviours. In turn, some men may choose to build muscle because it may initially help them alleviate some of these uncertainties. In interviews with many men often speak about how they start to play around with weights. In building muscle, they begin to identify the benefits of this activity. They mention, for example, how people like pictures on social media. They speak about clicks on their social media, and these social media interactions strengthen this desire for perhaps more muscle building. And these men identified how the gym started to form or become part of their identity. In the gym, men were and currently are also exposed to new standards of training, standards of muscularity, standards of masculinity. As I identified in this context, men may create a form of masculine identity by building a muscular physique. Other men might perform masculinity by acts that show masculinity. Fitness challenging, performing more reps than anyone else in the gym, for example. In our research, many men describe how they initially felt intimidated by other men in the gym because of men's muscular physiques, their training regimes. The larger the muscle, the leaner the physique, the more reps, the more power or capital someone holds, and particularly a man holds, in the gym-based context. These dominant masculine standards in many gyms may be connected to some of the statements and the discourse we hear around gyms and in wider gym cultures, such as never quit, no pain, no gain, be stronger than your excuses, are kind of the top 3 on my Google search. All have reference to what some men may believe, they might believe they should aspire to. Gym trainers and coaches also promote these messages. Just last week, I received a message from a well-known local gym trainer telling me they could boost me as a man, whatever that actually means, and help me lose weight and gain muscle through their evidence-informed bodybuilding program. The gym and messages that surround it may promote a potentially problematic attitude and related behaviours that are tied to these dominant masculine standards. And in our work, men often highlight how significant people or influences in the gym and how they might learn from these people. These interactions they disclose, they've become more aware of and were willing to engage in ever more perhaps risky behaviours to enhance their physique. From manipulating weightlifting cycles to supplement use to excessively manipulating eating and exercising to bulk, to build muscle. So it might be excessive calorie consumption, and to cut or reduce, for example, engaging in frequent fasted exercise or manipulating diet, to taking steroids to build and stimulants to cut. So I'll stop talking very shortly, but so far, hopefully I have covered some of the physical and behavioural consequences and some connections, I hope, to our work and around masculinity. And these are from my perspective, from my experiences and what I've seen and heard from men in my work. And these viewpoints may be expanded on and challenged by other panel members and people here today. Equally, other men might tell different stories to the stories we've told in our work. And we need more of these stories on different groups of men other than the stories we have in the literature so far. I think, though, before I pass back over, George, I think it's important to identify that also at high levels of gym engagement, which is often really promoted in gyms. We've got 24-hour-a-day gyms at the moment. People are rewarded by this as well. But men become perhaps more socially isolated at higher levels of gym engagement. They might start to cut off interactions that may not support their muscular identity. For example, missing important social commitments has often been mentioned by men in our work. Missing family events. It may be also influences occupational choices. For example, many of the men we have worked with and interviewed have described how issues related to a traditional 9-to-5 employment and how they feel forced to select an employment that supports and fits with kind of this muscle building. And these might be broader factors to consider and how men might describe this if they came to in a PE class or something, or sorry, sort of a consultation or anything like that. It might describe some of these other factors. Working with students, they often describe how these broader factors might influence them. In turn, George, hopefully through that, I think gym culture does promote kind of disordered behaviours, but I think we need to consider the individual and the meanings they make of their context. So hopefully that captures that a little bit, George. And I'll be quiet for a short while.
Thank you, Christian. No, yeah, I mean, I was saying at the start that we've only got an hour to talk about this whole stuff, and there's such an amazing way to set the scene. And I was making notes as you were talking about things I could ask you about, and I'm realizing I'm not going to get a chance to. Maybe we need to do another webinar afterwards. But yeah, I think that the concept of masculinity, I think, plays such a huge role in the fitness and gym culture. You know, the idea of, you know, these stereotypical hegemonic masculine ideals, these ideas of working really hard and pushing through pain and all those things are, if anyone who follows any fitness account will recognize no pain, no gain, and don't skip leg day and all those things. Like, you know, they're so ingrained in it, and it's all around that pushing through pain. I wonder if anyone else on the panel has any kind of thoughts from what Christian was saying.
Completely agree with with all of it, and I think some of what I'm going to talk about will follow that really nicely.
Yeah, I think that social media element as well that Christian you mentioned, and I will move on in a second, but you know, we obviously know that plays a huge role in disordered eating and kind of a lot of these behaviors. But again, that there's analysis looking at some of the fitness industry, social media, and looking at the one of the things that they introduced or spoke about was this idea of battling the self, which I think I talk about quite often, which is the idea that, you know, it's your responsibility as a member of the gym community. Often this is pushed on to when your mind and body tell you to slow down, you know, when you get tired, or if you can't, you feel tired, you feel stressed, you feel whatever, your day at work was horrible. It's your responsibility to push past that and keep going anyway. And these messaging in the gym, I think that likely links to these issues as well. But anyway, oh, sorry, James, go on.
No, sorry. I just wanted to say, you said, have we got anything to say about it? I think just to say that sorry, there was just a noise. Yeah, I just would say that I completely agree with that, and it was really useful to hear that as a brilliant overview, wasn't it? And I think I would just want to insert a couple of really small things, well, they're not really small things, but very quickly. One of them is sort of around I don't know, to me it sounds like this sort of cultural context of mastery of the body and suppression of what we actually might need, or overriding, you know, that it's sort of lauded that we can override our basic bodily needs. And I think to me that just really sort of correlates with some experiences that I've had of an eating disorder. That's one of them. And then as a fitness professional who runs my own self-employed business, I'd also say there's the economic context, in that, like, you know, we need people to come to our classes. So if they can come every day, that's fantastic, right? But I think that it has to be that that's varied and that it's appropriate and that kind of stuff if somebody wants to come every day. And I think that it's, yeah, there's that thing to consider as well. So it's that economic pressures on our bodies as commodities and our psychology as commodities, I think, that are being exploited, which is, you know, I could go on about that a lot, but it's not a political meeting. But I think those things are really important, and they drive some of this messaging.
Yeah, thank you, James. That's I really like that you brought up the whole economic side of it, because yeah, I guess I want it to be clear that from this we do have that kind of empathy for people who work in gyms and work in these areas, and that it obviously makes sense that you need people to come, and you need to put messages across that get people to do what you're doing. So in some aspects it makes sense why people are pushing these messages on and things. And yeah, I suppose, yeah, I don't want this to be that we're hating on that whole world, because we're definitely not. But I'm going to move us on to another question. I'm going to aim this one at Anna. So a lot of the behaviors that we're talking about, as Christian mentioned, can be really healthy for a lot of people, but we know that they can go too far. So what are some of the issues that can come out of these behaviors that are commonly pushed in the gym?
Thanks, George. I don't apologise for repeating some of the points that have already been made by Christian and James, because I think, you know, there will be things that we are all saying, because they are really strong points that have a big impact. I think the really important element of this is, as a physio, I promote exercise. It's my job to prescribe exercise, and you know, it is part of a healthy lifestyle and really important. I think the difference with the gym element is that fitness doesn't always equal health, yet that's how it's marketed. So there's a big, you know, if you come to the gym, you will be healthy. And actually that's not always true. And there's lots of behaviors that happen in the gym culture that go against healthy rather than fit. The big one being overtraining. And there's lots of reasons why that happens and how that happens. You know, Christian mentions 24-hour opening. Again, it's an added pressure, isn't it, of I don't really feel like going to the gym, I've had a hard day in work, I'm absolutely shattered, but the gym is open, I've paid my membership, therefore I need to go, or it's expected for me to go. Lots of the motivational quotes, I know Chrissia mentioned a few. Did have a little weep when I did my Google search through them. Obviously, as a physio, no pain, no gain, you know, it's not something I would advocate. But some of the other ones, train insane or remain the same. That one really struck a chord. Someone busier than you is working out right now. So what? Lucky for them. Your body can stand almost anything. It's your mind you have to convince. Again, as a physio, I really dispute that. And then another one, which might be triggering for some people, so I do apologise. But again, I think it just shows some of the strength in the messages out there. Suck it up, and one day you won't have to suck it up. So, you know, these quotes are out there, they're on walls, they're on screensavers, they're visible all the time. And in a moment, they might give somebody the right motivation, but, you know, the chances are that they're not going to encourage healthy choices. Another part of the overtraining is that it's about that more, the bigger is better. You know, the more you do, the better it is. And again, from a training point of view, that's not accurate. So we're looking at quality, not quantity. And that often gets, you know, lost as a message. And again, it's that not training is seen as quitting or a weakness, whereas actually not training is really important on occasions. And part of the messages used around training is, again, it's that how heavy is the weight you've lifted, how many reps have you done, how hard have you worked. Actually, the fact is you build muscle by recovering, not by, you know, the work is important, but actually it's that message, it's how that message is sold, that you don't build muscle until it recovers. They don't tell you that on the wall, do they? They don't say by, you know, resting today, your muscles will improve. Again, so the economic element of it is a big part of it, and that's some of the notes that I'd made about for today was, you know, the use of supplements. Gyms buy in, they have to sell it as part of their business. There might be a really valid reason to use a supplement, but again, that's not always the case. They encourage meal replacements on occasion, not always healthy, and you know, it's how the person interprets those marketing messages rather than actually is it helpful and healthy for that individual. The language used is something that I feel quite strongly about in gym and fitness culture, not just the gym. So it's not about what your body can do for you. It's not about the power, the skill, the agility, the flexibility. It's about how shredded, how cut, how lean, how defined. Again, which just paints a very, very different picture. Quite often it's the training for size and aesthetics, not the function. So yes, I can lift this weight. So what? What does that mean? What does that allow your body to do for you? Nowhere in any of this does fun or enjoyment get mentioned. And from a healthy lifestyle point of view, exercising for fun and enjoyment should actually be one of the main reasons we do, and can be such a risk protector. But, you know, there's no mention of that. I think the gym area itself, I know Zoe might talk about this in a little bit more detail later, but you know, it can be a really intimidating environment. And as a young boy who maybe has been encouraged to go to the gym, or somebody who hasn't had that experience before, to walk into a gym and have a free weights area full of bodybuilders and, you know, really strong people can lead to some issues around actually not wanting to do that, so they avoid that completely, and then that's not a good training program either, or a balanced fitness program. Or it leads to that really competitive, I need to look like that to come in here, or I need to be able to lift that amount of weight to fit in, or, you know, I'm really worried that somebody's going to think I'm weak and therefore have to comply with that area. And it's not, you know, a lot of it is implied. So it's how people interpret it. And as I said, you know, and as George very well said, we're not slamming gym culture. There's a really, really important place for the gym in our society. But it needs to be done in a much more rounded, balanced, healthier way that makes fitness fun and, you know, really reduces the risk for our young people and adults who you know, who use these areas. Sorry, I gabbled, and that's my spiel.
No, it's excellent. Again, thank you so much. Again, there's so many points that I've noted down myself. I think, yeah, like you said, the focus on weight and shape is such a problem in the gym, and again, I suppose it as horrible as it is, it makes somewhat sense for companies who are trying to make money. If you can make people insecure about things, then you're probably going to make more money from it, which is a horrible thing to happen, but is likely, you know, why people do it to some degree. Not everyone, obviously. But yeah, and then the motivational quotes. I used to, when I was like struggling at my most, I used to listen to motivational speakers instead of music. I used to just listen to them on repeat. I used to listen to these videos just telling me that I'd be more of a man if I did these things, and that other people won't understand me, and that's okay. And, you know, all these messages of keep pushing and people are going to question you, and yeah, it's scary. And I've seen in the comment section loads of people have been, you know, writing down the quotes that they've seen in gyms and seen on social media, and it's horrible to read them because, again, I accepted them when I was in that world. That was, you know, I could have told you them all off the top of my head most likely, and I probably would have had them tattooed on me if I was old enough. You know, it's scary.
And there's one point that I suppose it's not linked to gym culture exactly, but it does in a way, is around sport as well, and the implied bigger is better for sport. So I know from a rugby point of view, I know lots of young people who have been told you need to go to the gym to bulk up, you're not big enough. Doesn't take into account their speed, their agility, their skill level, their genetics, how you know, going to the gym and lifting weights and looking a certain way is not going to make them a better rugby player, or you know, sort of like some of the sports that have weight categories, and even the names of that, you're a heavyweight.
Yeah.
You know, it just encourages that bulking, bigging, you know, thing that is sold in the gym culture.
Yeah, someone's just put in the chat there, it leans more into stereotypes. And yeah, there is this assumption, isn't there, that muscle equals better performance, and in some cases it can do, but it's not always. And also, as you mentioned before, there's an assumption that, you know, muscle or going to the gym equals health and equals healthy. And there's a study by Scott Griffiths and his colleagues where they compared muscle dysmorphia case studies to anorexia case studies and people's view on those people. And really interestingly was the people who read the muscle dysmorphia case study, they said that they felt like they were more likely to recover. So someone with more muscle doing weightlifting training, that kind of thing, they felt like they were more likely to recover than someone with anorexia. So people assume that they're more capable of getting better. So they also said they would be less likely to talk to them or reach out to help them if they were worried about them. So there's this general assumption that if someone's lifting weights, they must be fine. Like, even if they're not fine, they're gonna be fine.
It just reiterates that message about body fat being unhealthy, when actually it's really not. It's excess body fat is unhealthy, but body fat is a really important part of our bodily functions, and we need it. Yet, you know, it's sold in the gyms as get down to shred body fat. You need to get down to this percentage to look as, you know, for your muscles to look a certain way, and actually it's a bit terrifying.
I've just seen in the chat, Vicky, I can't remember exactly who all the authors were off the top of my head, but I do know Scott Griffiths was the lead author for it. But yeah, that was purely off the top of my head, so I can't remember exactly who. But yeah, you can look it up. I'm sure you'll find it. If anyone unless anyone has anything else they want to add, we'll move on to the next one. So the second half, we are going to be talking more about, I suppose, what we think can happen in gyms and what can change. And I want to ask Zoe a question, I suppose, to start off with, which is, so the gym and the culture that exists in it can be a problem for those who are in recovery from eating disorder as well. So what are some of the things that you think affect those in recovery, and do you think there are any ways that we can avoid that?
Hello, lovely. Thank you for having me on, by the way. It's lovely to see you. Yeah, the gym, it's a difficult one because it's not necessarily just a gym that's the problem. Obviously, gym culture just does spread out through our social medias, through advertising. can't even walk down the street without seeing those posters that we've already talked about. And it's really difficult to try and rebel, I guess, against such a normalised behaviour. But it's not just those that are in recovery that's at risk as well. It's those that are at risk of developing an eating disorder that we kind of have to think about as well. Some of the things that I kind of encourage my service users to do is, sound a bit harsh, but maybe take a little bit of responsibility. I wonder why that's making you, I wonder what's going on for you there, if that's causing some anxieties. Let's be curious about it. Let's explore that, because it may suggest, actually, if you're taking all that on board, there may be a bit of an issue there. So it's kind of a learning point, to be honest. Another one, I'm not blaming social media, don't shout at me, but of course I have to talk about it because it is a common theme where gym culture exists. It's very accessible on social media, very accessible, and not necessarily an age limit on social media either. But again, some of the things that we can do to protect ourselves if we are in recovery, or to protect children, is on social media. There's those 3 little dots now that you can click on in your settings, and you can hide and mute certain words, which I would recommend doing, because social media can be a joyous place when it's not filled with, again, going back to these very, I've got a word there, phrases that we keep hearing. Yep, so you can mute all those sort of words. With the gym itself, it is very easy to start comparing our bodies, again, as we've already mentioned. Start thinking, oh my gosh, I don't look like them. Seeing someone do exercise and think, oh, if I copy their exercise regime, I'm going to look like them. And we're completely forgetting about genetics. We are forgetting that, it's a very cheesy quote, but even if we ate the same, exercise the same, of course, we're still going to look completely different because of those genetics. So again, more emphasis on, do what feels right for you. We're all different. I'd love to see some posters in the gyms about that. That'd be lovely to see. Again, celebrating the fact that we all are genetically different, and actually that's kind of a good thing, to be honest. I think we're missing that person-centered approach in gyms. It's not a case of one size fits all. It's not a case of, oh, everyone should do this latest exercise regime, because again, it might not necessarily be right for them. So I don't want to go into it too much, but again, gyms, BTs kind of have a little bit of responsibility just to make sure that we are having that person-centered approach to exercise. Another thing that I personally had to do was I did have to look at my friendships. I absolutely did, and it is very hard to do. But I realised that all of my friends were my gym buddies, if you like, and all we would talk about every minute of every day was gym, exercise, and I didn't really have much room in my brain for everything else. So again, working one-to-one with young people, that is something that I do approach in a sensitive way. What are your friendships like, I wonder? What sort of influences are your friends having on you? Not just for children, adults as well, because I was an adult when I was in the midst of my eating disorder. Yeah. I'm trying not to get on my high horse, but again, I've said it, exercising really needs to be focused on joyful movement. It needs to be focused on, how wonderful is it that our bodies can do this sort of thing. The second we exercise because we want to, our bodies will actually get more out of it than if we have to train because we need to, because we're not listening to what our bodies say. We're doing this regime because it's been drilled into us. So again, celebrating your bodies, finding maybe a class that's not burn those calories with these steps, but oh my gosh, look at that dance routine that you just did. That was so much fun. I'll be honest, I go to a style of dance class and I think I spend more time laughing and falling over than actually to dancing. But that for me is, I look forward to going to those classes because it's a bit more fun. If it was drill, sergeant, drop and give me 20, not a chance, no thank you, not in a million years. But again, in the Walk for My Eating Disorder, it would have loved that. So I've gone off on a tangent, I do apologise, I'm wrapping it up, I swear. But just overall, just celebrating, what your bodies can do, celebrating that joyful movement, recognising that we are all different, we are all unique. remembering that one exercise style isn't going to necessarily suit you. Go with what your body is saying. Listen to your body, taking that person-centered approach, muting all those adverts on socials, recognizing that we do live in a triggering world, sadly. We might not be able to do much about that, but we can take responsibility a little bit for our own triggers. And if we notice ourselves being triggered, okay, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on for me there. And having those conversations with those young people about how to manage those triggers as well. I hope all that made sense.
It did very much. And again, there's so much there to touch on, and I think one of the things that really stood out to me was, you know, when you're talking about the idea of enjoying your movement and you know, laughing and having fun, like the world that I was in when I was struggling with it, the bodybuilding world, it couldn't be any more opposite to that. You know, so much of it was around you have to show like strength and you have to be tough, and it has to be about, you know, pushing through pain and things. And there's a really nice quote that I've read semi-recently, which is, you know, life shouldn't be about the facade of strength. It should be about having the strength to live without a facade. And I love that, you know, and that's what that is, isn't it? The strength to be okay with having a laugh when you're exercising and enjoying yourself, rather than having to, you know, show this message of, you know, I'm working really hard, look how much I'm sweating, look how much I'm whatever. You know, there's also like strength and kind of beauty and just having fun and enjoying yourself. And yeah, I think I still toe that line occasionally where I still struggle and end up kind of pushing myself too hard because I feel like it's going to show something to myself. And where, yeah, I have so much more fun and, you know, I feel so much better about myself when I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to carry on what you just said there. Again, when I was in a walk with it all, I can't remember enjoying it in a way. It was very, I've got to do this exercise, number orientated. That's what I was after. Very number orientated, goal orientated. Whereas again, now I look forward to my Wednesday night classes because of that fun element, because it is just, I don't think about numbers. I have no idea. And it just takes that pressure off myself as well. So I'm not pushing myself. And again, it just helps me to listen, keep going on about this, listen to my body. And if I feel, oh gosh, I pulled something there, I can pause, have a little stretch, and I'm not losing numbers, if you like, doing so.
Yeah, amazing. I don't know if any of the other panel have any thoughts about this.
I've got loads, George, but I guess I might speak about it anyway, so I'll be quiet.
I think, yeah, completely what Zoe is saying. Again, but from a physio point of view and just looking at balance and, you know, like a healthy lifestyle, it's also taking into account what else we've done that day from an activity point of view. And it's not just structured exercise that counts. It's all those other things as well. Going shopping, you know, it's quite a workout, especially when you're checking things on the oldie conveyor belt as fast as you possibly can. You know, I feel like I've been to the gym sometimes. I know where the supermarkets exist. So it's taking into account those sorts of things as well, and then allowing yourself to let that count. Because again, if you've done that and are tired, why would you then want to go to the gym as well? You don't need to. You've been active, your muscles and your joints are working in the exactly same way as they would in a more structured way. So it's about giving yourself permission to accept that that counts, and to take it into account when you do think, oh, I haven't done anything today. Actually, you have. You've taken the dog out. You've rushed the kids to school on the school run. You know, you've been to the supermarket. You met a friend and went for a well-being walk. All of that counts as exercise. And it's about, you know, accepting that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Zoe, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, it's just a second again to go on what Anna said. I have a 2-year-old. You know, that is all the exercise I need, I'll be honest. Running around the house after toddlers is exhausting. But again, as Anna's beautifully put it, you know, recognizing that, oh my gosh, I'm actually feeling tired. And it's okay to have rest days, because again, as Anna said, it actually helps the muscles recover. So you get more out of your workouts as well. So thank you, Anna.
I also wanted to touch on, because we've got a few more minutes till I want to ask the last question, but you mentioned about friendships and you're questioning your friendships, and it really made me think of, there's a study by Hannah Stoyle, who they were looking specifically at athletes, but they were looking at the tripartite model of eating disorders and ways of like explaining how people can get eating disorders for people who don't know. And they somewhat argued in their conclusions about not necessarily talking about how society influences athletes, but more so how their social circle does. Because what happens with a lot of athletes, and I would argue in the gym as well, at least from my experience, is as you take on these behaviors, people who aren't doing it kind of make jokes or kind of point it out, and you stop speaking to them as much. And then, your circle gets smaller, and then some of those people in that smaller circle start questioning what you're doing as well, and then you get rid of them, and suddenly what your normal behavior is so extreme compared to the rest of the world, and you kind of ignore the rest of the world because you've learned to. And actually, I think that kind of makes point to anyone here who's a personal trainer or a coach or something. You likely still exist in that small social circle, and they probably still look up to you. You're kind of higher up in the hierarchy in that small little circle they have. So you have so much influence in delivering these messages and talking about fun and talking about moving away from the way you look all the time and looking more at performance, or different things. So I guess that's just an important message to make, and I'm getting nods from the rest of the panel, so I imagine people agree. Amazing. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to move on then, and I'm going to orientate this last question to James, and then we'll have some discussion about it as well. So James, what are some of the things that we would like to see happen in gyms and in its wider culture as well to support prevention and support?
Yeah, I'm glad this is my question, because I was making some notes and things and thinking about how, well, first thing I was thinking was that this is so rich and that there's so much that we could go into for so many different points here, and I won't be able to address them all. And I think we've heard some of the real problems that exist in gyms and in this area, and I don't want to deny those, but I kind of wanted to insert that it can be in a different way. Like I don't think that it has to be like this, and actually positive communities where people are included, whatever their body type, whatever their ability, etc., they do exist. And so it's kind of maybe about finding them or creating them, actually, if you're a professional like I am and like I hope to do. So that's something that I think is really important. So I'm glad to have this question, and I think that sort of stepping out of it just for a moment, like, it's necessary because we need to move our bodies. I think a big problem that I encountered in my treatment was you cannot exercise, that's part of your eating disorder, when it never was, and then it became a problem because it was forbidden. But actually, anybody who's taking in an adequate amount of nutrition will have energy in their bodies, especially if they have ADHD like I did, and they will want to very naturally move, and that shouldn't be squashed. We shouldn't say, oh, we should, that is to be mistrusted because it's always going to be part of the eating disorder. Actually, we've heard about this idea of developing trust for our bodies and for our sort of natural inclinations, and we are meant to move. I'm also hypermobile. I have a genetic condition, so that genetic point and individual difference is so important. And actually, there's some indication that some people with eating disorders are more likely to be hypermobile. And then actually you need some sort of physio-based stuff that has been, resistance training has stopped me from having chronic injuries all of the time. And that's why I entered a gym, because I never felt I was welcome there, but it's been extremely helpful. And I love going to the gym. I love exercising and moving my body, but it's about sort of what I'm doing when, really, and that idea of nuance, because it's not just this is what it is and this is what it always is and it's always like that for everybody at all times. It's like, actually, we could reimagine the gym, we could reimagine groups of people where we move our bodies and make them ones where they're inclusive, and it might be about different messaging being visibly different, and there's lots of different strands, I think, that we've already touched on that could help us to create that. And I think that I'm really interested in the not so much what, although what is really important. What kind of movement are you doing right now? Is it actually appropriate for you? But I'm interested in the how do we move, and I think that's where yoga offers sort of a really useful framework in terms of providing balance, because it's, for me, another lens to look at it is you know, we heard earlier about mastery of the body or control, and I saw that Dawn is here, put something in the chat, who I recently, we just published a paper about this idea of control in eating disorders, and there's some overlap perhaps with exercise as well. I think if we're thinking, what do we want? Or do we want to always feel like we're on edge of have we done enough? Are we mastering the body? Because if we don't engage in these behaviors, it's all going to naturally slide towards being completely out of control and having a terrible body. Or do we want to have, you know, do we want to have a sense of trust that actually we don't have to be in control all of the time, and that it will somehow work out and we don't have to be vigilant of it all the time? So I'm thinking, picture a first part, you know, before even thinking what do we do in those actual places and, you know, in spaces and communities, is, well, what kind of relationships with our body or ways of being in our body do we want to promote? What is our vision of being well in the body? Because if we don't, you know, we've heard there are these cultural underlying things that then manifest in the ways that we might move, or this gym culture, etc. And I think got to have these different approaches, thinking about it from that sort of cultural values point of view. What is good psychological, physical health, in, you know, in terms of being well in your body? And too often I think that's, you know, dislocated, and we see a separation between the two. So think about body image and eating disorders, and I always hear about it's the way that you think about your body, and there's this cognitive emphasis, and actually isn't it how you are being in your body? And that's very different, I suppose. And I don't think that we take that embodied approach, you know, wholeheartedly enough. And actually a lot of this stuff is about override negative states of embodiment, like pain and discomfort, being praised and being detached from that, which is a very natural response if you're feeling pain, so being disembodied. And I'm thinking, you know, how can we make whatever it is that we're doing, wherever it is, something that is moving us perhaps towards being more embodied, so more attuned to what's going on, so we can be more responsive and fluid about it rather than static about it, because I think this sort of nuance and context is important. And then can it be something that's, you know, so we've got disembodied, embodied, and then more states of positive embodiment, because that's been shown to be associated with positive body image, whatever that idea is, rather than negative embodiment. Or, you know, if you're more embodied, you'll be more in tune to all of it. So it's very natural, like I said, to cut off from feeling discomfort in your body, which is, for me, is just a personal thing. I felt that's what anorexia was. So shutting down any sense perception here because it was all too painful and all too difficult. And then when it came back, there was absolutely no support whatsoever in treatment in terms of how to be in my body again and how to move my body again. And that is so, if we don't take that into treatment, and that we're thinking, you know, preventing problems with exercise, because not everybody with eating disorders do have them in the first place. If we don't have that rehabilitation in treatment, then it is so high risk currently to hope that people who very naturally want to move their bodies again will somehow land upon a positive community and space in the world out there as it is. So I think that, you know, I then developed lots of problems with that and doing half marathons on stress fractures and all this kind of stuff, you know, before I learned that there are different ways to be in your body. But I happened to come across it myself before it was, you know, too late. And I sort of really worry about that. There's just another, you know, another couple of things really. I think that the idea of play is so important, and that for me, in that positive state of embodiment. So as a yoga teacher, I hope to create, you know, positive values and inclusion, you know, in my space. And sometimes that's an antidote to a lot of the stuff that does exist, got to be honest. But play is such an important part of that, like getting adults, and I'm in Cambridge, so there are quite a lot of academic people here, getting them to do forward rolls and things like that. And they're like, oh my goodness, like, but if you were a child, would you have thought twice about this? I'm like, no, like what happened, right? And it's sort of like, can we sort of learn to have that playfulness where we're not taking it so seriously and actually not having to be in control, and be less focused on results and more in tune with sort of the here and now, because that's where we're going to move from. Even if we do want to get stronger, which we shouldn't say, you know, I don't say to people, I'm going to sort of poo-poo on your idea of getting stronger with your yoga push-ups or more flexible. Like, that's okay to have that if you want that. It's sometimes impossible with genetics because our bones are set in a certain way, so some people will never do the splits, however hard they try. But I think, you know, it's about doing that responsibly and safely, and actually being okay where you're at, or at least willing to, you know, encounter that somehow. So I think play is a really, really important part of that. And the very, very last thing is, I think that we too often think of our health and well-being as a personal, individual endeavor. And I think it's, you know, in my classes, it's like, here we are on our little discrete mats, and we're all, you know, separate. And if you're British, certainly don't, you know, make a noise or anything, or have a bodily function in front of somebody else, right? So it's very individualistic kind of thing, our personal mission. And of course, we judge people positively and negatively on their bodies. We blame people for being overweight when it's much more to do with the food environment, ultra-processed foods, our lifestyle, all this kind of stuff that we weren't evolved for. And we praise people for being in control, just a little bit like how we might actually look up to some of the qualities we see in anorexia and frown on some of those ones we might see in things that to do with, say, binge eating, in my opinion. And actually, we need to sort of get rid of that idea, even if it does feel very nice to think that we've achieved something through our own personal endeavor. Like, I have always been able to do all the things in yoga because I'm naturally like that, and I never had to try. And people are like, oh, you're so flexible, how long did it take you to practice? And like, it's a genetic disorder, like, it's not all our individual thing. And so I think, what about, you know, health and well-being being created in communities that move together positively, that you can be an individual, a unique individual in that group, and accepted and celebrated for your body and what wonderful things it can do, rather than what it can't do. And we can think, what could I do in this moment, rather than what should I be doing? And I think, you know, that is so important, because eating disorders can be very isolating. Anybody with lived experience may have felt that. And so, yeah, I think we have to remember this sort of power of community as well, and that exercise is a brilliant facilitator of all of these things that I've talked about on the positive side. But it's about creating the communities, the structures, the places, the messaging, I think, to make that happen. So that's been a lot of me rambling. Anna, you thought that you did, but I am really passionate about it, and I do think that it's something where there's a really positive story to tell as well. But there are a lot of risks, you know, and I do wonder why eating disorder services aren't like taking this more seriously in where they direct people to. I get GPs sending people to yoga to me, exercise referral, and sometimes they go, they should go to the beginners one. And once somebody came to like yoga back bending workshop and said, my GP told me to come here for back pain, and I was like, this is contortionism, like what, like this is the last thing in the world that you need. So it's the right thing at the right time, and having those links, at least from a service point of view, with those places that are going to provide people with more positive experiences as well.
Amazing, James. Yeah, so many amazing points, and I've got points and questions and different things that I think we could do for the last 7 minutes. So I'm going to try and only pick one, and then I'll open up for the rest of the panelists if anyone else wants to pick one out. But I guess the one that I'm going to go with was when you're talking about nuance near the start, and how, you know, this is different for everyone. And I think, you know, like you say, I think in services, people providing help for people with eating disorders, often there's this, you know, these maybe some fear or some, like, you know, around bringing exercise in for people who are maybe overusing it or excessively using it in different ways. And I think that brings to the point with, you know, as we know with eating disorders, they are psychological things, they are mental health experiences. And I think what it comes down to is the meaning of that exercise, and that's where things like yoga and things like your embodiment, you know, mentioning. And I often look at bodybuilders, and there tends to be kind of two schools of thought in bodybuilding. It's obviously a lot more complicated than this, but there's bodybuilders who are all about, you know, pushing through pain and being the kind of disembodiment, like you were talking about, James, just you know, just being in pain and just pushing yourself really, really hard and kind of escaping that pain and pushing past it. And then there are other ones who talk about the kind of mind-body connection, and I wonder if, no one's really done any research on this, but I wonder if that mind-body connection group actually have a better relationship with the, you know, themselves, and have kind of more positive well-being in general. James, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I would just say a couple of things really. I think they're all really important points. Mind-body connection kind of annoys me because it suggests one's over here and one's over there, and I'm like, it's all part of the same thing. But we sometimes don't have the language to articulate these things. But I think I think, which wasn't a criticism at all, and just very like whole system kind of approach. I think that, I don't know, to be frank, I think sometimes actually we don't always have to enjoy it, exercise, because sometimes it's rehab. I do some resistance exercises that I find very, very boring, and I like to try and make them exciting, and I can do, but I don't always have the energy for that. And if I don't do them, I will get like severe pelvic pain. Like it's just a health thing, and seeing it as part of our health, but that we can try and find the things that we need, and in a positive kind of way. It's just sort of like, you don't have to always enjoy food forevermore. You know, when you have an eating disorder, it can be quite just functional for anybody. Not every mouthful has to be delicious. And I think that, you know, we don't want to also expect ourselves to be enjoying everything all of the time. Sometimes people drag themselves to my yoga class, and they, you know, absolutely so grateful that they did afterwards, because they can make it work for them in the ways that they need to. Or actually afterwards they might think, you know, and I encourage them to reflect on it, maybe think, actually, maybe I shouldn't have done that today. And sometimes we do that, and we have to notice it and think, maybe next time I'll learn from that and not do that. So it's, again, even it's just really nuanced, isn't it? I think different things to different people at different times, but it can be very functional. It can be that you make it fun, can be just going through the motions. But I think that it's definitely not this sort of one size fits all kind of thing.
Fantastic, thank you, James. Anyone else got any thoughts? Anything they want to add?
Can I just jump in, George? I think like many of the people we work with come from the context of rugby, of gyms, and if we think about that culture and what's promoted within it, it's almost, we need to also influence the coaches and what they're saying. We need to influence the trainers and what they're telling people to do. Really liked James' points around feeling connected to the body, and I think in many ways what young people are certainly exposed to in those contexts, that rugby as an example, is that message that it's all about getting bigger, it's all about looking a certain way, and we're kind of disconnecting the functional elements of what the body can do and what the person can actually do in that context. And the amount of times that I've heard that phrase, being from a rugby context myself, that people need to be bigger, people need to be stronger, people need to, and all of that relates to what the body looks like. And I think some of the functional things of what the body can do, and that functional aspects that have been talked across the talk, also relate to broader athletic communities, and not just exercise. That needs to be wider than just exercise. So hopefully that captures some of that, George. The other thing was around just gym trainers and things like that, and people in gym spaces, around going back to a point that was right at the start of the conversation, around the amount of times that I've heard that my body's my business card comes up in gyms and gym spaces. We hear that from coaches in that context, trainers in that context, but also people moving to that context might feel also forced in some way to live up to those standards that are reinforced in those contexts. And I think that functional and embodied related thinking around the body and what the body can do, the function and form of the body, it's not about the form of the body, it's about what the body can do. And I think gym spaces can be really positive. And I know of many very positive gym spaces and gym spaces that really do reinforce, many rugby cultures that reinforce a real positive sort of body and echo positive body perceptions. But I also know of some that don't. And I think those messages need to go across those different cultures. So I'll stop my ramblings there, George.
No, that's amazing. Thank you, Christian. And I was just looking at the comment section. I just seen a comment from I hope they don't mind me reading this out. So I won't mention names just in case they don't want me to mention anyone. But I'm not sure where this phrase was said, but someone's put in the comment that really want to push back against the phrase I heard earlier, completely out of control and have a terrible body, posed as an antithetical extreme to too tightly punitively controlled body. There's no way for a body to be terrible, and we can't think there is if we're meant to be at peace with ourselves in ways that encourage connection, presence, and healing. Important and careful with our language at both ends of the spectrum. And I guess I wanted to read that out to acknowledge it, and also say that I don't think anyone here really thinks that comment is necessarily correct. I think James got his hand up.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, sorry, go on, James.
Can I just say quickly? I agree with that comment. From what I've read, I think that was clumsy on my part in a way. I think I was trying to illustrate, perhaps more from my experience. I want to speak for other people of the idea that might be the fear, but it's not necessarily at all real. In the sense that, like, I don't think we should be feeling like we have to always be on mastering the body on the one hand, because if we don't, the fear would be that we would have this everything would go out of control, we'd have a terrible body. And of course that is exactly perhaps the problematic nature of that, which is something I've experienced, of this really black and white thinking that I've had. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that if we let go of that control, that sort of mastery and the punitive side that can come with that some people experience, including me in the past, then actually that does not we do never have a terrible body. I think our bodies are miracles, and that we actually aren't out of control. Perhaps we're just safe to not have to be doing all of this stuff, right? And I think that you're exactly right with that, I think.
Fantastic, thanks, James. I didn't even realize it was you who said it, which maybe speaks to some of my own internalized stuff with my past with these kind of things. So thank you for mentioning that, and yeah, something for us to all think about. And I know you've got your hand raised, so you can go. And we've only got, I want to end it soon, so try and keep it brief if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll be brief, I promise. Yeah, it's just reiterating again, some of the messages that everyone's talked about today around how amazing our bodies are, and actually we should really be celebrating what they can do. And it was lovely to hear as a physio, James, acknowledging the difficulties he's got being hypermobile. And as physios, we get that a lot, and we get to, a lot of people looking for treatment around that. And actually he's completely flipped it, and now that's an amazing positive for him as a yoga participant and instructor, that he's got that amazing range to do that. So actually, some things that society might see as flaws in our bodies are actually really, really positive and allow us to do so many amazing things. And I think, very cheesy, but just to finish off with, we should exercise because we love our bodies, not because we hate them. And as physios working within eating disorders, there are a growing group of us, which is amazing. And one of the things that, again, that James mentioned, is that idea of banning exercise is long gone. As we're treating people with dysfunctional or over-exercising or, not healthy exercise beliefs, that has changed.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you so much to the panelists today. I really appreciate you all being here, and for everyone listening. And we're not done just yet. We're going to have a Q&A in a minute, but what we're first going to do, which is very exciting, I believe Lucy's going to put in the chat for us a link to an amazing animation about excessive exercise and eating disorders made by Stacey Bias, and in collaboration with a few researchers, including myself and different people. It's absolutely amazing, and we've got a link to a little short survey. The survey is literally one question before, then you watch the video, and then one question after. The video is about 3 minutes long, and then there is also a box for you to add some further comments if you have some. We'd really appreciate any feedback on it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say until let's do 10 minutes. So until 14 past 1. So very precise there, and then we'll come back and we'll do questions for the last 15 or so minutes. And yeah, feel free to put them in the chat, and Lucy will pick out a few for us but also it will open up for people to speak verbally if they want to as well. So yeah, people do please go click the link in the chat. We'll keep ourselves muted and cameras off until 14 minutes past 1. Hello everyone, we're back at 14 minutes past 1. So we're gonna, hopefully everyone's managed to have some time to watch the animation. We're gonna move on to a Q&A now, and we can also discuss the animation if people want to have any points on it or any thoughts. I've also seen that Professor Heike Bartel's in the room now, who was one of the leads on the project, so really nice to see her. She's waving. Hello, Heike. Do people have any points or questions at all, anything like that? Lucy, I don't know if you have any questions from the chat or anything that you want to pose, but just to remind everyone, we are still recording, so if you do want to vocalize any questions, you obviously will be in the recording, so feel free to keep your cameras off or just type in the chat, completely up to you. But yeah, we'll hand over to everyone.
We have had a few questions in the chat. It's up to you whether you want me to read some out or go with the room.
We had one hand raised then. I don't know if it's gone down now, so you may not want to ask it anymore, which is completely fine. Do you want to? I'm not going to try and butcher your name, so I apologize. But yeah, please.
Yeah, my name is Shai. I think I like the diversity right there. It's a way of creating more awareness that eating disorder does not only affect what the stereotypical or the stigma people think is only for people, females or maybe white people. And I also like the end of the animation whereby it's always good to check in with someone if you perceive or observe someone is struggling or over exercising. So I thought it was a very good way to kind of like describe how important it is.
Thank you very much. And I'm presuming you're referring to the animation there, just people who haven't watched it. But yeah, thank you for that. That's very kind of you. I think that's something that we really wanted to get across with the animation. I know Hank is there. I think Stacey's maybe in here as well. I don't know if Stacey's still here. If you want to speak, Stacey, you're welcome to as well. But Stacey was the animator who did it for us. So big shout out to Stacey. But yeah, thank you for that. It's very, very nice to hear that you got that from that. James, you got your hand up.
Sorry, it's me again. Tell me if I talk too long. It was just to give feedback on the video and say how brilliant it is, and I think it's something that's really needed. And from that exercise professional point of view, that I have other teachers and instructors and things coming to me saying, I'm really worried about this person and I don't know what to do. Am I condoning their behavior? Am I colluding with their illness? You know, it's really problematic, isn't it? Because people have the free will to do things, you know, but and you know, it might be the one thing that's somehow keeping them going, but it's harmful potentially. And so like actually the practical part of thinking, how can I start, or just seeing an example of like, you know, somebody sitting next to somebody and having a conversation, I think that's just very encouraging for people, and that it feels quite you get a non-threatening feel about it, that it's not going to be treading on eggshells, even if people might feel like that. So it felt very positive in that way to me. So thank you, and it's something I'll definitely be sharing with many people who ask, how do I you know, get started even thinking about this subject with this person. I think that would really help.
Thanks, James. And also just to say that we are working on a training tool as well that's designed for exercise professionals that will go alongside it. So that'll be out soon, hopefully. And Zoe, I see you've got your hand raised.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to say massive thank you and massive well done to the team behind that animation. It's so well put together and I adore it. I'm not going to lie, it's beautiful. I just want to draw your attention to one of the comments, if I may, that says, if only we could have this up in screens in the gyms. Oh, if only. That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's if someone owns a gym here who wants to show that kind of animation there, or you know, we could arrange a talk or something, I'm sure we'd all be up for that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you, Zoe. That's really nice of you to say. Heike, you've got your hand raised. I'll just remind everyone, this is Professor Heike Bartel, who was one of the leads for this animation and the tool that's coming across with it. Heike, over to you.
Or just plain Heike will do. Yeah, thanks, and lovely seeing you. I just wanted to stress, we actually have tentative plans to roll it out, especially with the training tools to gyms, and why not ask Mr. Bannatyne and the many other gyms that are there whether they would be happy to invest in that. It doesn't cost much and it might change a lot. But the point I wanted to make, and I think it's important to, when you introduce something like that, this is just the end result that you're seeing. I think what went on before is the co-creation process, and if anybody is interested in doing something like that, I'm really I put my email address in the chat. It's working with Stacey as somebody who has the ethical and the artistic sensitivity to work with the music team around that and to create this, but importantly to work with people with lived experience and researchers, and a project like that. And I think that's, I would say that, but that's what the arts can do, is this co-creation of knowledge where you don't just have the one big boss who prescribes what we should and shouldn't do, but where it's really coming together as a team and in a very creative and uplifting way. And just wanted to stress that it's not just about the film, but the process of creation. And if anybody is interested and has an idea in this field to do something similar, I'm very, very happy to bounce ideas.
Amazing. Thank you, Heike. Do we have any questions in the chat? Lucy, have you seen anything in particular?
Yeah, we have had a few questions in the chat, so apologies that we're probably not going to get through them now. Hopefully, when we get the recording out, maybe I can steal the panel a bit longer and get them to answer the questions, and we can put it within the blog or somewhere on the First Steps website. Before I do ask one of the questions, though, I did just want to say thank you to the panel for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure working with George on our Eating Disorder Awareness Week campaign. So I just wanted to say thank you before this conversation closes. So the question that I picked out, which I think is a good thing to finish on, hopefully the panel can all share their views in this next 10 minutes, but was a question from Tom around, is the panel positive for the future, or do you foresee ED and disordered eating, BDD, broadening and deepening into the population groups? I suppose for adults and young people as well. I thought that was a really good question for you guys to tackle before we finish.
It's a very good question, and I think the problem is it's really difficult, isn't it? I would say that I personally am positive, at least looking at from a research point of view, that there seems to be more research going into these areas and more nuanced research going into these areas, and the researchers, a lot of the researchers who are doing it are here. So it's brilliant to see more going into it. So that's excellent. And I'm a big believer that research is the foundation that then change is built on, and hopefully different things can move from there. But also just from discussions, I talk with people who work in gyms, and I talk to people who work in services and all sorts of people all the time on my podcast or just over email and different things. And people seem interested in this kind of thing. We had quite a lot of sign-ups for people to listen to today's event, and hopefully people are taking stuff back, and people are free to contact, I'm sure, anyone in this panel if they want to. So I'm hoping the fact that people are here and people are listening, and I know there are people from services, is positive. So yeah, I would say I am. Anyone else got any thoughts? Heike?
Sorry, I'm not on the panel, but if I may chip in, I share your views and I don't share them. I think the figures will go up. I am not as optimistic as that. I think more people will develop problems and correlated problems and come forward to report them. And I don't share as much your trust in research, George, but that's beautiful, because you are early career and I'm late career, and maybe I'm just a bit long in the tooth. What makes me optimistic is that we very tentatively, and that's something that we really should nurture, is looking more at co-created research, patient-centered. We recognize the expertise of experts by experience, and there are openings in funding and processes in interdisciplinary collaboration that I think can really drive things. And I think a charity like First Steps is really important here too. That is what makes me a bit more optimistic that the landscape is very, very, sometimes frustratingly, slowly changing but there are kind of glimmers, and I think it's this involvement of people with lived experience that can really make a big change here, and listen to them and involving them in creating research.
Amazing, thank you, Heike. I don't know whose hand went up first between Zoe and James, so whoever feel that they were first, go.
We're like miming at each other on the screen. We're being embodied about it, aren't we? Don't need words anymore. Shall I just go because I'm shameless? So, yeah, I think the question was around our hopes, wasn't it? And going forward, yeah, I think that there's a number of things. I think I would echo a lot of what Heike said, really, because I think that we do need more knowledge for the future, you know, whether or not more and more people get eating disorders. And I think that it needs to be co-created with people who've got experience, because for a lot of the time, I think, you know, things haven't been done for people with eating disorders because they've been offered to us. It's because we've had to really fight for them, and we've had to really push for things and to be heard. So I think the more that can happen, and the more that we can actually be included, not just involved, I think like that will really help to move things forwards, because there's a lot of energy there. And I think also that the other thing I would say is that I really hope that, you know, like you were saying, George, about the energy that is there and the interest that is there, like that we can take that and use that. You know, everybody here can go away from today taking that energy and inspiration to create something new, and to put that into creating something better, rather than just sort of having to argue against what is not currently working. Because I think sometimes we have to, that can like absorb a lot of energy. And I think that, yes, some things need to be called out, obviously, but can we embody like something new and different in our systems, in our research? And I think that has to be the way for me, because it's just like recovery, in my experience. I can't just go back to how it was, or I can't like just keep fighting against something. I actually have to think that energy could go into creating something completely different and completely new. So I hope we can take that from today, and it has to be together, it has to be collaborative.
Amazing. And Zoe?
Thank you. Beautifully worded, James. Yeah, so I'm kind of ping-ponging, I guess, between yes and no to that question. So part of me is going, yeah, you know what, let's do this. We can see change, we can do this. But then part of me is like, oh, government, obesity strategy, let's introduce calories on the menu. And yet we know that statistic that 1 in 4 people that count calories go on to develop an eating disorder. So part of me is a wee bit bleak as well. However, George, you put on this event. People are coming, people are listening, people are joining in the conversations, which goes to show that change is happening. I am just going to do a little brag about First Steps, if I may, because one of the things I feel that we do really well here is we listen to our service users. If there's a service user that's sat in one of our groups that's not sure I like this, can we maybe try this? Yeah, of course. Come and talk to us, come and give it a go, come and tell us how we can improve. Again, as James beautifully said, listening to the experts by experience, because what do we know at the end of the day? It's them that are going through it. So listening to those people with lived experience, but also including the professionals to do the research, working collaboratively. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. But hopefully we're not fighting against too many policies that could maybe not be so helpful.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anyone have any other points on that question? Any thoughts? We've only got 3 minutes left, so I don't. Oh, Anna, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, only just quickly to say that I agree with Zoe. Said, you know, there are some frightening things happening from a policy point of view, but from an NHS point of view, we have had investment, and locally, you know, I'm really proud to work for some fantastic teams that are growing. So, you know, we have Peer Mentor, you know, as part of our team. We have a massive NDT. We are really, really lucky, and our health board has invested in that, and the Welsh government are. I don't know about England, sorry, but you know, I think there is that makes me hopeful.
That's really nice to hear. Yeah, I do think there are, you know, maybe I'm because of where I'm situated, I've seen lots of positive changes, and I'm kind of ignoring the negative stuff that everyone's bringing up. But you know, I do know that at least within the muscularity stuff, there are some policy changes, like in the new Mead guidelines around eating disorders. There's mention of steroids and things like that in there, so that's one thing that brings in. And then I also used to work for the Quality Network for Eating Disorders, and their community standards now have a standard that is around muscularity-orientated body image and stuff. So you know, the services are at least being mentioned around muscularity stuff, which tends to relate to gym things. So there's at least that nuance coming in to some degree. So hopefully that progresses. And then Christian, last but not least, we've got 1 minute left.
Fantastic. I'll be quick. So I'm positive about it, but we're discussing these issues today. If we look at when the topic of muscle dysmorphia, for example, was introduced in 1993, Harrison Pope started to introduce it, and we're still discussing, and I haven't seen many of these events typically focused on men to date. And what I think is really positive is this event today, the fantastic animation we've seen, and I just think we need to start talking about talking to and with men about these issues, and that's going to really help. But from a research perspective, I think we need to communicate that better as well through methods like the fantastic animation we've seen. So I'll stop there, George. Thank you.
Brilliant sum up. Thank you, Christian. And yeah, we're at the end now. So a big thank you again to all my panelists, and thank you to Lucy and First Steps and everyone who's been involved. Yeah, really appreciate everyone's time today. I hope everyone did enjoy the animation. We are officially releasing it now. I think First Steps are going to do a post soon if they haven't already done one. So please do share it everywhere you possibly can. We'd really appreciate that. And hopefully it'll actually have an impact. And yeah, I think with everyone's help here sharing it, I think that's how we'll have it. Mostly. And as I said before, if we can talk further and move things on from just this discussion, because this was just a 90-minute discussion, and not even that, it was an hour, and then we'd watch the video for a bit. That's what's most important, is those next steps now. So please do get in contact with First Steps, with the panelists here, and let's try and make some changes. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and George.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Tess.
Are we staying on for a moment?
Yeah. I mean, if you need to go somewhere, James, don't feel obliged.